Right. Guess I'll go next. My name is Isaiah Mangold. I am the supervisor for innovation department here at Sierra Nevada in Chico. Actually, I'm not here in my home, but close enough. I've been with the brewery for about 21 years. I've held every role in production through the brewing process. Um, I lead up our innovation team, which also includes all of our alpha hop bottle club beers. So all the barrel aging, from sour barrel aging to spirit barrels, and now everything beyond that you can imagine. So our innovation crew kind of runs the gamut. We kind of headed up the kombucha as well. So beyond beer now, yeah, you pick it up. We probably played around with it. So um, yeah, that's about it.
Right, Josh, what's up, Josh? Let me unmute you here.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Hey, just wanted to say, thanks as one of the officers of the club for doing this with us. It's a great opportunity. I can see Isaiah's got Bob Ross rocking in the background there, and I think that's pretty hip. And I was out at the brewery back in 2015 with Beer Camp, so it's nostalgic seeing the copper kettle in the background there. That's a good time, and we're definitely looking forward to hearing from you guys tonight.
Cool.
Nothing specifically questioned right now, but I'm sure there's other folks that have something to rack your brains with.
We'll do our very best.
Thanks.
All right, Alex, what's up?
Hey, same thing Josh said. Thank y'all very much for taking the time to spend time with us East Coasters. So mainly two questions for you. So the first, I saw Celebration's going to be hitting the shelves soon. So hella excited about that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it is all Centennial hops, right? Mostly, primarily.
Cascade and Centennial, yeah, a lot.
Nice.
And I believe, I'm trying to think for the cold side, it's just about the same. Cold side and dry hops and everything, just purely Cascade and Centennial. And,
nice. Now, for those ratios, do you keep them the same on hot side and cold side, or do you switch up the favor one more than the other?
The ratio is about the same. At least the poundage is a little bit different. We can go a little bit bigger poundage, at least for the cold side, where we can stuff it in torpedoes as opposed to like a little dry hop bag. But it's generally primarily Cascade and then just like a little bit of Centennial for both, but the ratio about the same. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. I personally prefer the other C hop, Chinook, which is the name of a pup right in the background.
Oh, that's awesome.
But and then the second question, maybe more of an involved question. But I love Bigfoot. Look forward to it every year. I'm a fan of super dank, super strong beers. How do you manage to make that beer be as smooth as it is, as strong as it is, and no high alcohols, at least none that I perceive, using just like a standard California ale yeast? At least what I've heard that, you use like a California ale yeast with that.
I'll tell you a little bit. One of the things is we take a lot of the heavy lifting off of the yeast because you're familiar with yeast shock and something that high alcohol, that high sugar, even in the beginning when we start fermentation. The open fermenters are a big part of it. We kind of remove osmotic pressure from the equation to make sure that there's not a ton of shock going onto that yeast when we inoculate. One of the other things is we just give it time. Honestly, with the bottle conditioning that we do, our beer kind of hangs out in warehouse at a very carefully temperature controlled area for a while. We give Bigfoot a little bit longer than everything else before we actually release it to market.
Okay, so Bigfoot is bottle conditioned?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you.
Then Max, Isaiah, if you guys have anything else to add, I know Bigfoot is an extraordinarily complex beer.
Yeah, you can go deep dive in that beer, and it really is very unique to Chico. Like Trevor said, the open fermentation, those fermenting vessels that we have there in Chico are very unique. The kettles that we brew on is only brewed in our 100-barrel German brew house, which is a steam heated copper from the bottom. So there's this caramelization, this very hint of roast that you get from it that you would not get in our, state of the art, calandria driven kettles in the production brew house, which is just making super clean wort. So, very unique processes going into Bigfoot, and, we would never change that because, if we ever get out of having those kettles, it'll be a challenge to try to replicate, those flavors that you get, those scorched kind of caramel flavors that you get from that old kettle.
Yeah. I guess to add on to that question, so you always hear about people keeping as much Bigfoot as they can to do crazy verticals. What's the oldest Bigfoot y'all have had, and was it worth the wait?
I'll go last because I got a good one.
Well, just so you know, in Chico, Ken has Grossman, the owner, has a Bigfoot from every year that it's been made. So I haven't actually done a vertical going back that far in a couple of years. So I'm not even sure what that would be. 20 plus years.
Wow. So it definitely holds up.
If it's stored correctly, absolutely. There ain't nothing going to touch that beer. Put it in the pyramid.
Max, what about you?
As far as I've been back is about 2010. I did have a bottle of 2009 that I was really looking forward to try that my roommate took out of the fridge and gave to his girlfriend. And she, I think, was already drunk enough, and after having that, threw it back up. So 2010, about 10 years back, is as far as I've been.
That is tough. I can tell you guys, I didn't mess around with Bigfoot too much before I actually joined Sierra Nevada. I was aware of it. I'd had it once or twice. I liked it. But this year, when 2020 Bigfoot released, I made a pot of chili with it because beer and food is kind of my thing. I'll talk about beer and food until you guys tell me to shut up. And
I like
to
chili.
pair alongside the 2020 Bigfoot chili that I made, I had a 2000 Bigfoot, and it was a good night.
Ooh, that
I
sounds
went to bed early.
Y2K Bigfoot. I like it.
Yeah.
Oh, when will the 2020 Bigfoot be coming out? Or is it already out?
It's up.
Oh, nice.
I tell you what we have is so when we started the barrel program, the first thing we put in barrels was Bigfoot. And so some of those barrels that we've used for blends, that's some of my best. Actually, I think just adding that oxidation, that rapid oxidation through is actually kind of a pretty cool component of that beer. In spirit barrels specifically, we haven't got that same type of aging out of wine barrels, but if you can get a hold of any of the barrel aged Bigfoots that we've put out on the market, those are gonna, obviously those are gonna age a little bit more because they have gone through rapid aging, and they have a little higher alcohol to them. But it's a very cool kind of maturation process that happens with it. That's unique to our bottle conditioned Bigfoot. So if you see any of those out there, highly recommend putting some in your collection if you do that kind of thing.
Definitely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, you're on mute, I believe.
Mike has muted himself.
I muted myself. Ryan, you're up. What's up?
What are you guys drinking? You're wise. I have one of your Oktoberfests.
Oh, nice. Trevor and I, we're splitting just a classic here. Pale Ale.
This is a beer that we just came out with. We collaborated with local farmers in the area to do a Sierra Oro beer. So it's we got to work with three of the local farms. Chico State, actually, it is peaches. So we got about 300 pounds of peaches from them, fresh picked out at the farm. One of our local almond growers here got us some roasted almond meal and slivers. And then we had some rice from Lumber Farms, which is local here. So we had some brown rice syrup, which was actually pretty cool to work with. And then our estate malt here created a Baltic porter, about 7% Baltic porter with all those in there together. And then cork and cage 375s. Yeah, we're super happy with how it turned out. It has all those nice fruity elements of the that lager yeast in a porter just brings so much more complexity to the style that you maybe aren't accustomed to. And then we kind of added all the adjuncts and it's quite the. If you're a foodie, so Trevor, I think it's just got so many layers to it. Super happy.
Oh yeah, no, it's fantastic.
All right,
And
then
speaking of, I'm about to go grab another one. I wish I was drinking Eau Treves. I was so in love with that beer. Gozes are kind of a big thing where I'm from anyway. We do have a tequila barrel-aged Eau Treves here right now on site, and it is probably my favorite that I've had so far.
Nice. What's everyone else drinking? I saw Oktoberfest. You got? Is that what you were drinking? Oktoberfest?
Me?
Nice. Gross.
You want some Bigfoot? Trev?
I'm actually going to get a little bit of wild.
Oh, cool.
all right. Well, next up will be Rich.
Hey guys, again, as one of the officers, I'm going to give you guys thanks for stopping by again. So my question, I want to kind of piggyback on the open fermentation question and maybe expand upon it. Like my favorite beers from Sierra Nevada, and I'm not even like a big out my favorite beers aren't necessarily the ones that have big alcohol, but my favorite ones are actually Narwhal and the Ovala Quad from Sierra. Do you guys do open fermentation for all of your higher alcohol beers, or is that like kind of like more of a Bigfoot thing? And what benefits do you what are the trade-offs that you get between open fermentation versus closed?
I think Trevor hit upon it. With the Chico ale yeast in particular, in those higher alcohol beers, it really just drives down kind of that fusel bite that you get from being stressed out, or just basically keeping in all those early esters from fermentation and liberating them really. And yes, our open fermenters, we do typically do the higher alcohol beers through them. I mean, back in the day, pale ale used to go through there. So we've done a lot of different things. Narwhal goes through there for sure. It doesn't only go through there though. It's one of those, we kind of mix it up a little bit and blend it with some dish bottom beers and, beers that have a little bit more surface area. So that's one of the other things about those higher alcohol beers is, I don't know if you're familiar with like conical fermentation as opposed to horizontal fermentation. That's very, very popular, like lager beers or even some Belgian beers where the yeast cells are very, very small because they have a lineage back to wine yeast. So just having that surface area for that initial growth of fermentation and the flavors that you get in those first 2 days of fermentation has a pretty big impact on your beer. The quad, we've done it through the opens once, but because of limitation in the small batch that we were doing for the Ovala Quad, we've only done it through there once. It was something when that was the very first project that I worked on in innovation. We didn't have an innovation department or anything like that back then, but the Ovala projects, Belgian beers, that's one of my, back when I was home brewing before I got into professional brewing, that was really what I was into and studying.
Belgian triple right here.
Very nice. So yeah, that was always like I was hoping from the get-go that we'd be able to utilize the open fermenters, but it wasn't until actually just a couple of years ago that we were able to send some through the open fermenters. And I didn't see a huge change in flavor necessarily, but I saw a huge change in yeast performance from the Belgian yeast that we were using for that. So I believe that's the Westmalle yeast for that typical one, or that one.
What change did you see in terms of the performance? Did it perform better under open fermentation, or was it did it maybe give like more of like the ester quality you wanted if you did it under like say like a closed fermentation setting?
It was just performance overall fermentation. So typically with our opens, we'll run into the opens and they don't stay. Their life doesn't stay in the opens. We get them in there. They go through growth phase. They go through the initial stages of fermentation, and then we transfer them out of there into a dish bottom fermenter or a conical fermenter, usually to a dish bottom fermenter at that point. And what I saw then is, I don't know, some Belgian yeast just has that typical Belgian creep that you get in fermentation. So we'll see it because we track every day fermentation that the last tenth of drop in fermentation just could take forever. It's painful sometimes, and especially on a large, like 200 barrels of beer, we'd really see that. And what I saw after the open fermentation is we just had, a pretty standard ale fermentation performance.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next hand is Patrick.
Hey guys, so I have kind of I'm gonna cheat. I have a bit of a 3-part question. It's not
who, trivia.
Yeah, it's a who, where, and how question. So, you guys have a department for innovation, but the who part is, do you guys, as a department, are you the only place where ideas come from, or do you guys open up to other people within the business, other brewers and stuff like that, or are you a very centralized unit that is what you do?
Well,
go ahead, Trevor.
I was going to say, to preface Isaiah's real answer, I'll give you guys a personal story. I actually came to him some time ago and started talking about the idea of making a product that's not quite a sizer, not quite a seltzer, an idea of a couple of different fermentation blends. And we kicked it around for a while and took a couple of ideas from it and moved on. So I know that Isaiah is perfectly willing to work with anybody who's got good ideas from a personal standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Innovation doesn't work with confines like that. If everything's down to one person, making these, it's very hard to move and very hard to be creative and to maximize creativity and, to leave yourself open to, producing something truly innovative. So, to answer your question, anybody there's no limits to it, so.
Very cool.
And we do, just so you know, innovation department also is not Chico based. So Mills River, we have our team out there, they have a fantastic brewer, world-class brewers out there, and, 20 barrel innovation brew house that feeds directly into their pub. So, I mean, our department isn't solely in Chico.
Very cool. And, so that was kind of both who and where, I suppose. So, how do you guys have like an approach that you take when trying to come up with a new beer or a new flavor or a new product? Do you guys start with like this grand idea and throw stuff at the wall, or do you have like a balanced approach of try this, this didn't work, okay, let's do this? How exactly do you guys come up with the ideas for your new products?
They come from a lot of different areas. Really, it could be an ask. If it's something, being at a company that's, been in craft beer for 40 years, plus at this level, there's a lot to fall back on, a lot of knowledge. So in certain things, like if somebody came and we're like, we need a West Coast IPA, we don't need to take a ton of swings at that. We can pretty much nail it to whatever, something that's within our wheelhouse. But if it's something, say, for instance, like Otravez, like Trevor was mentioning, when that font came out, that was something that required quite a bit of development into, because of the dangers of bringing in something like a lactic bacteria into our ale brewery. And, what's the best route? How are we going to go about that? And how do we make something that's, the same? And to the consumer, when you get Otravez, in Texas, it's going to be the same as you get it in California. So, that's part of the puzzle. So, wants can come from different places. It could be a marketing thing, and from innovation, it could be something like, Trevor coming to us and saying, hey, I got this idea. And we're like, cool, let's get riff on that a little bit. And that's something that's, new and not within our real workings as Sierra Nevada. So we may have to take quite a few hits at. So it all depends, I guess, what it comes down to. Rambling answer, sorry.
It's cool. That's how I talk and ask questions. So it's only fair.
All right. Next up is Josh.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I want to go back to the open fermentation idea with the big beers. And I think you mentioned that you use the open fermentation because it reduces the esters and takes the pressure off the yeast. Is that because there's no head pressure? Like because it is open, there's no like actual vessel pressurizing the yeast?
Yeah, so yeah, osmotic pressure being that it's not under pressure in a vessel like a conical, and it's also, part of that equation is the verticality of it, so you're talking 800 barrels straight up,
Right.
of a fermenter. So all that pressure from the top to the bottom down.
Hydrostatic pressure, yeah.
Exactly, but inside with the density of that liquid, depending with a high alcohol beer, you're going to have a lot of sugar to start off with. So that's just adding to that pressure. With open fermentation, that's once again, it's kind of a much more surface area, so you alleviate a lot of that, and it's broken up.
Yeah.
We have 400 barrel open fermenters, so yes.
It's an interesting notion for homebrewers to like. We always throw an airlock on or put it in a spike kind of brewing vessel or something that's got some sort of closed system that we can try the Saison style where you just put some like tin foil over the top of your carboy and try and reduce that pressure. Never really thought about doing that with the bigger beers just to reduce that. Yeah, it's a good idea. It's good. It's good thoughts.
Yeah, the other part of that, maybe the argument for it in home brewing is that if you have a vigorous fermentation from it, you're going to be producing so much CO2. You probably don't want to put an airlock right away on it.
Paint the ceiling, yeah.
Making darks, yeah.
That's right. Thanks. Thanks.
I have and I'll age myself a little bit here. I have what I call my Tamagotchi theory on yeast. Yeast is a Tamagotchi. All it wants to do is eat and defecate all over the place. That's what it does. Yeah. And the better care you can take care of it, the better care you can give it, the better off it's going to perform, kind of thing.
Yeah.
We liken it with those big beers. There's just so much sugar there. The yeast get in there, and a lot of times they just party way too hard.
Yeah.
Crashing out. They're
too hard, too fast. Yeah.
Especially with those young, you're pitching some new culture in there. Those are just like freshmen coming in. They can't.
Yeah. Right.
Just crashing out.
As opposed to like pouring your wort on top of an old cake or something.
Right. Yeah. If you're able to harvest or something, or get a nice, yeast, culture established, if you're homebrewing that much, always going to be better. Always. In every way, in every single way. You can see completely different beers from that, just ester formation from stressed yeast, or not formation, but esters put out by stressed yeast, or phenolics even because of the stressed yeast, especially in Belgian beer. If you don't have a good, you're just going to get a ton of phenolics coming off it.
Yeah. Meat. Interesting. Might change the way I do things.
Next up is Eddie.
Hopefully for the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey guys. All right, this is a two-part question, more geared towards Isaiah. So the Mills River location, is that also mass production, or is it only the Innovation Center? And the second part of this question is the water chemistry that different? Like everyone says, Asheville is, that's what they're known for. So is that really a thing, or are you altering it anyway that it doesn't matter?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the most critical ingredient in everything we're doing, right? So that was the hugest part of the puzzle when we built the brewery. So first, to answer your first part, no, the facility in Mills River is a full production facility, and it was actually built to be just a production facility, and then it got carried away and became a work of art. If you've never been there, and if you've been to Chico, they couldn't be more different. The one in Mills River is an absolute show-stopping, gorgeous experience. It's not even just a brewery; it's the entire 200+ acres of amazing, North Carolina land, and everything about it. It makes us extremely jealous in Chico.
Malt Disney World.
Yes, yeah, we work in a pretty amazing brewery. We affectionately call it the Franken Brewery because it's been pieced together so much, or the Winchester Mystery Brewery, if you're familiar with the Winchester Mystery House. It doesn't really make sense. You get lost very easily. Get lost. I've been there 20 years. Sometimes there's doors that lead nowhere. At gorgeous facility though. So yes, they do. They have a huge pub though, and a 20-barrel Casper Schultz brewery that is able to fill the pub with plenty of beer, and they do a ton of innovative work out there as well. So when we built the brewery, the number one component was the water. Chico water is very hard. We strip it down and process it and get it to our liking, and it's been that way for 40 years. So absolutely, it was something that took us quite some time. We brewed pale ale for ever, it seemed like, to try to get a flavor match down, and we still do that every week. We do flavor matching with the North Carolina brewery.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
And-
more what I was asking, like if you're
Okay.
taking advantage of that Asheville location's water, or if you're trying to match to
We're always trying to make them the same, because we're making the same product, East Coast and West Coast.
Got it.
And as far as production capacities go, I can tell you just from what I remember, like when Mills River was put in, it didn't even have a canning line. I believe I'm correct on that. Max can actually tell you a little bit more about that. We have different packaging systems in the different areas, and we're trying to catch up with one another. But,
Yeah, their canning line over there, I mean, just, again, like what Isaiah was saying, the whole Franken Brewery style here, the main reason that happened was because we started so small with never really a plan of how big we were going to get or any idea how much space we were going to need building along as we went. So the canning line had moved from one place to another. We're over there, they were able to go with, bought probably like 4 times as much land, so we would never run into the land problem, and went straight off the bat with, like, I think a canning line's about twice as big as ours. I don't remember the bottle or the can per line minute stat for review over there in Mills River. It's something insane.
Yeah,
The speed it goes, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
yeah, it's massive.
Yeah.
Super fast.
Also, we don't have any photos of the canning lines or the bottling lines right now. I do have a couple of photos of the open fermenters I can share with you guys later if you want.
You should share the ones from Mills River because they are actually German made for like actual beer fermenters, where the ones in Chico are old dairy fermenters.
Yeah, well, we went and took these today with our cameras. It's a little tough to get to Mills River and back before the meeting. But
I bet if you go on the website, you guys can check them out. They're pretty cool. Vinny and Russian River has the same ones.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go a little out of hand order just to spread around the people get to ask questions. Let's go to Scott.
Max to break the Bigfoot open.
I was just wondering, does Sierra Nevada still predominantly use whole cone hops, or do you guys mess with pellets at all?
I believe we are the largest consumer of whole cone hops in the craft brewing industry. In fact, luckily you guys don't have smell-o-vision, so the cheese isn't going to hit you because they've been sitting here for a while. But I have a whole cup full of whole cone hops, like right here. And these were pulled directly off of one of our packs.
What are those?
Isovaleric.
Yeah.
I believe this was, Max, do you remember? I think this was Centennial that came out, again, weeks old. So.
Oh, the fresh stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah,
2020
that was
Centennial.
and I don't remember who asked, but 2020 Bigfoot, we just cracked one open here, and so art.
Yeah, I'd like to harken back to the, I think it was the original question or something about celebration and the Hopson celebration. Just so you know, the Harvest Ale that just came out, the Wet Hop Ale, is this year different. It's 100% Centennial, though. If you want to get a nice Centennial bomb, it's
Oh, yeah, Northern Hemi.
Northern Hemisphere Harvest.
There's a little 2020 Bigfoot for you.
Delicious.
Next up is Alex.
All right. So, Summerfest. I love that beer. I am an IPA fan first, and then next, it'd have to be a lager lover. How do you get that so crisp in terms of fermentation? So, a big popular thing going on right now, at least amongst home brewers, I know some smaller craft breweries, is the rapid or accelerated lagering technique, where you start it at 50 and then you basically ramp it up 2 degrees a day up until the diacetyl rest, and you finish a lager in 2 weeks, right? At least that's the the main gist of it. How do y'all do it, and what is your personal philosophy?
Isaiah, all my stuff's gonna be personal. Isaiah, this is
Yeah, so I mean, Summerfest is kind of tricky every year. I mean, it comes down to your what you're adding to your water. Calcium levels I think are huge for that specific beer, because it is a heavily, I shouldn't say heavily, and by no standards today is it heavily, but at the time when it was developed, it was a pretty heavily hopped lager. So skewing your calcium sulfate to the proper levels that you need, which people can scoff at or don't believe that it's needed. But
on that, so sorry to interrupt you, but
no, not at all.
Just add on to that. What are, if you can release what the preferred ppm of sulfate and chloride is with Lagerfest, and what your preferred levels are, a ratio or ppm?
So it's going to change for each beer, and absolutely, I mean, you want to start out at a base of 50 ppm of calcium in general, whether you get that from sulfate or chloride. It shouldn't matter. I would skew heavily. So we do, if you're doing all grain, I would lighten up on your grain part of that, because you're going to start pulling out a ton of grain flavor from your mash, actually carrying over into your kettle. And add most of that in the kettle, so you really have that carrying over into fermentation and building your flavor with hops later on. So I would just caution against adding it at that point, if you do that at all. Obviously, you want to adjust your mashing regimen with enough chloride if you're buffering that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, 50 ppm for a hoppy beer, no brainer. You're going to go sulfate heavy on that to get that crispness. One other thing is really the hops that you are going to use. Look into cohumolone rich hops that really are going to give you a crisper bitterness during in the final product. Like Simcoe, for instance, sounds kind of crazy, and being the most expensive hop on the market, people slap me in the face for using that as a bittering hop, but it's actually one of the highest cohumolone hops that you can get, which I don't believe it's anecdotal at this point. It's going to give you a nice crisp bitterness. The bitterness is going to be different than like an IPA if you're getting, a very heavily hop beer, but for something crisp and refreshing, I would definitely skew towards that. You can look it up. There's a whole list of like some older hops that are higher in cohumolone.
Yeah. Now, what about your sulfate to chloride ratio for Summerfest or lagers in general?
Well, it's lagers in general. Like I said, it's different for everyone. So for something like Sierra Nevada, is a pretty much 1-to-1 ratio in there. Like I said, it's all heavily kettle additions. So I think off the top of my head, it's over 100 ppm that you're getting from that in the kettle. Summerfest is going to be even more than that, because it's a lot hoppier of a beer than Sierra Nevada, which is like a more domestic style kind of lager.
And how you like the fermentation schedule for Summerfest?
So fermentation schedule with lager yeast is pretty standard. It starts off at 48 degrees pitch temp. You're going to raise that, let it free rise up to 52. Okay. You hold it there for about well, for us, it's about 5 days, or until you're about 3/4 of the way through fermentation, and then you let it raise up to whatever it gets to. Well, not to whatever it gets to, 60 degrees, and that's really a for diacetyl uptake from the end. And we really don't see it. The biggest control point for fermentation for Sufferfest would be when we start to say bung the tank, because you have a ton of sulfur that's being produced by that lager yeast initially. And if you're under any sort of pressure, that's highly soluble and it's going to go stay in solution. You're going to end up with matchsticks and rotten eggs or fart parades or whatever.
Are you lagering that beer at all once it reaches your preferred gravity?
Yeah. Once we chill it down, it's a pretty standard 10-day lagering time at cold temp.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. If you want to try, if you have this ability, so I did a Doppelbock, we had an intern from Germany one time, and we went over lager fermentation, like traditional Doppelbock lager fermentation, which is starts at 42 degrees, and just stays there for like a month.
Yeah, I know for some of the Doppelbocks that I've made with another guy in the club, Ryan. We do the traditional German rule of thumb, which is 1 week of lagering per degree Play-Doh original gravity. Which, and for a Doppelbock, you're looking at fucking 20, 25 weeks at, for the higher end.
Yeah, I don't think they'd hold it around for that long, but
hey, home brewers, right?
Yeah. If you're able to do that cold of a fermentation, you get a good yeast culture that is going to be able to produce at that temperature, and you're able to hold, like a month-long fermentation and then lager it for another month. I think you're getting something pretty special.
All right, next up, Patrick, what I'm sure is a 5-part question.
1-part question, but I'll take as long as I possibly can to ask it. So Isaiah, you said that you've been with Sierra Nevada specifically for you said 20 years, 21?
21 years. Yep.
21 years. So I started drinking craft beer shortly after college, let's say 10 years ago. And in just those 10 years, the craft world has changed, and the number of breweries that we've seen has well over doubled, more than that in 20 years. So what has it been like from your perspective, being a professional for that long in the trade, watching the craft beer boom happen? And what's your honest take on where it's going and how you guys are pivoting that changing world?
Well, I'd probably make a lot more money if I knew where it was going. No one has a clue, but yeah, absolutely. This industry has changed. There's no comparison. Absolutely not. I've had to do a lot of soul searching, I think, in that time too, because being around the industry for that long and kind of going through the waves of change, when I got in and when I was a home brewer and everything, and any kind of studying you do, a lot of that stuff, a lot of what the trend is now kind of gets thrown in the face of that traditional or the scholastic norm, if you will. So yeah, it's I remember going to a beer tasting. It was up in Yakima, Washington, back when we used to go up there they used to do this hop school. It was basically just a bunch of brewers going up there. They were already going up there for hop selection, but then they do this kind of like little, symposium up there, and it was double IPAs. And so it was like all these brewers, like Bagby from San Diego. I don't know if you know these, like a lot of the bigger breweries, Sam from Dogfish Head and these early players, and craft beer, Vinny from Russian River. They were all doing these big double IPAs. They had 100,000 BU beers, quadruple hopped, and I took Bigfoot because that was the closest thing that we had to anything that they were doing, and that was kind of like, there's something different going on. Like there's some sea change going on in the craft brewing industry. And, that realistically, that was going on for a while, but up in Chico, we're pretty much on an island in Northern California. We're hundreds of miles away from, the closest place is Sacramento, and that only just now became a craft beer kind of town in the last 2 years, 3 years. So San Diego and these big craft beer meccas really started changing kind of the seawaters of craft brewing industry, and for the better, absolutely. The camaraderie that was there back in the day is still very much there. The brotherhood, we're extremely competitive brewers and companies, but when you go to any brewery, you're welcome with open arms, and there's just that guild brotherhood that you have there, unique to any industry out there that I know of. Everybody that comes here from different walks of life and from marketing or wherever, that's the one thing they always say is like, wow, this is really kind of unique, special. So hopefully that's always going to be there. That's one thing I know that's going to continue. What's going to happen after this, everything is going on, no idea. Tons of brothers and compatriots out there that are surely struggling.
Yeah, I'll say, even as a guy working for Anheuser-Busch for a hot minute, I used to teach a lot of classes at local breweries because I love local breweries and I love going there and having beers and stuff. And even with the associations that I had, there was never a single brewery I ever went to and talked to and taught a class at that I didn't end up shotgunning beers in the keg cooler at. So the camaraderie is very real. You just got to talk to people and let them know you love beer just as much as they do. Also, I find it hilarious. Imagine laboring for 20 years to make the absolute best beer you possibly can, only to find out in 2020 that people just want to drink fermented bottling sugar.
Yeah, that was one of the things I've always thought about is, especially with the well-established breweries that have been around for a long time, they fight as hard as they can to perfect this beer, expecting it to be the standard go-to that you get every time you go to the brewery. And then over the past X many years, it's changed so that shelf stability no longer that big of a thing. If anything, you don't want it to be oh god, don't get me started on the haze boys. But everyone is going for clarity. Doesn't matter as much anymore, so haze is in, and all of a sudden there's these new trends popping up all the time, and they stick around for half a day. And I wonder how, like, the smaller breweries can probably switch easier because they're only doing X many brews per month or whatnot, and at a certain size. But the larger guys that set those standards, it must be, one, invigorating to see all this innovation coming around, all these new things coming out, but also really frustrating because you work so hard on this beer and then you find out that you don't need it to be stable anymore, and they're onto something new.
Yeah, I dedicate a small portion of my day every day to weeping over photos of people stuffing ice cream and donuts into fermenters.
True story. Yeah, I would argue that stability is not important. I think what these breweries are doing, and we struggle with this as well because of the size that we are, is when you're able to send beer out of your own backdoor brewery, you control the conversation to the consumer, so you have less of an issue. So if you're sending out these huge, hugely unstable beers because they're unfiltered and they got a ton of proteins in them and everything because they're haze for days, you're saying drink fresh, bring your beer fresh, don't wait, don't hold on to it. You have that ability. But when you're a larger brewery that you're distributing to people, you don't have that conversation. So absolutely, stability is important because you want to make sure that people get the best representation of what you're making. So some of that soul searching I was talking about earlier, that's a very big one that I've had to when the haze craze first kicked off over there on the East Coast, that was really hard for us to wrap our brains around because, well, for one, we weren't getting any here. So anytime we got any over here, it looked like chum, in a glass because it had just coagulated and precipitated out so much that we're like, are people seriously paying $20+ a 4-pack for this stuff? Like the hops are horribly oxidized. Those are all stability issues. Well, when you go to Treehouse or you go to Trillium, you know, any of these people that were driving that initially, and you have it straight from the brewery, you're like, I get it. You know, this is a delicious beer. It's a delicious product. It's a valid style, but it's valid within 2 weeks in some of these cases, and then after that, drain pour.
Thank you.
Next up, Rich.
Hey, so I kind of wanted to pivot off of the technical brewing aspect of the conversation and get into some lighter topics. COVID. How has Sierra had to like pivot as far as like the beers that you've brewed, but also like what you can offer as a brewery, I guess, maybe in terms of like actual like tours, in terms of what you can offer to the customer when they come to the brewery. How has COVID affected you guys?
Isaiah, you want to tackle production, and then Max and I'll handle virtual?
Sure. So yeah, we well, first and foremost, luckily beer making is essential. So we have never stopped really since day one. What we had to do, and it had to happen very quickly, was we had to have all the protocols, make sure first and foremost that our staff is safe. You know, that we had everything we knew in real time coming out. We had people dedicated to information, putting out from the CDC and everything. So as far as production goes, it just required some retooling for labor. Really, it didn't stop us. Not as bad as fire season seemed to really kick us in the butt this year. That was a new one. But as far as COVID goes, we had to implement some new protocols and keep the ship brothers flying, you know, keep that beer pumping.
Yeah, and then from a standpoint of guest experiences, I'll tell you, Max, one of the reasons that he's here specifically, he actually spent the last several months as a brewer. So what we did was, because we haven't been doing any guest-facing tours whatsoever, we haven't had anybody on site since March 15th, actually. We kind of allowed the people, or I said this thing where we kind of figured out what the people on my team were passionate about, and then we sent them out there to go do that. Max was in brewing. I have a guy named Jordan. He was in agriculture for a while, helping out in the estate garden and the hop fields. It's been a really good time. As far as what we've been doing for tours, you're looking at it right now. This is part of it. We secured some equipment. We got some new stuff. We just got a GoPro the other day, which is where all of our photos came from today. So we're working on trying to bring like the idea of a brewery experience, or even better yet, a beer festival, to the public. We want people to be able to see what's going on here through the camera's eye, and we want to have stuff like this. A lot of breweries are doing things like pre-recorded content, and that's pretty cool. If you're interested in watching that, that's great. You can digest it at your own time. Cool. At Sierra Nevada, we've always been so dedicated to like the finest quality beer, the finest quality ingredients, the finest quality people we can get a hold of. I really, as the supervisor of this program, feel strongly that these, you know, like one-on-one, if you will, these person-to-person, these live, these kind of intimate events are the way to go. So we try to do that. Everybody who comes to us that wants to do some kind of virtual experience, we sort of tailor it to what they want. And then we sit down and have a couple of beers with them, because who doesn't miss that?
Absolutely. And we appreciate you guys for offering that to us.
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to be here. Max and I are having a blast. I'm sure Isaiah's having a good time too.
Definitely. Absolutely. Yeah. Virtual drinking room. I like it.
I guess just to keep things light, I'll just preface this by saying I'm the resident Belgian brewer and also sour brewer of the group. But the hops, we hope that everybody's doing okay over there, like in California, as far as both brewers, hop growers, and people in general are concerned. But for kind of a multi-part question, is the hop crop going to be affected? Will we get kind of a smoky aftertaste from the hops that we yield here?
Election will help.
What can we expect?
No.
You'll get that in wine for sure.
Here, you can use these. No, yeah, Isaiah, you were part of hop selection, right?
Yeah. The fires on the West Coast are very centralized to California, which is not a hop growing region for any of the beers that you're going to be getting. We do have some estate hops here, but they were harvested, pre-fire. So luckily they're not kiln dried on the vine. Even in Oregon, they are, the hop growing region is North Oregon, so Southern Oregon was on fire. So yeah, up in Washington, no, your hops are really nice this year. Really. Mosaic hops this year, yes.
Anytime.
The auto-tune of hops.
I was about to say your favorite hop, right, Isaiah?
That's
I
right.
love that.
Auto-tune of hops. Mosaic and everything.
Awesome. Good to know.
And Max, you've had your hands on the hops for what, months now? Well, your gloved hands.
Yeah. Yeah, working in the hop cooler, it's actually kind of been, now that I've been back in tours, the more days I am removed from the hop cooler, the more I can taste in my beers. Now that I don't have so much lupulin just like lodged in my nose, and everything else just come home and smell like cheese and socks every single day.
Absolutely. My wife made me put my clothes outside before I came home back in the day when we used to stuff all around hops.
Yeah, same. I was in between leases right when I started over there, staying with my partner, and she would make me wash my clothes in the laundromat too. So.
Yep. Yeah. Don't mix those clothes.
All right. Next up, Patrick.
I've got a million questions. So I think I asked this question at every meeting that we've had a guest on. And so from your personal experience, either professionally or as a home brewer, have you had any notable experiments that just went wrong? And I mean, like, you had an idea where I was thinking that these ingredients would go together really well, and it turned out like bad cheese. Like, have you ever had what are some of your experiments that just didn't work for one reason or another?
Well, I was going to go the other way. Anything that I didn't think was ever going to work and surprised me, because I was those. But things that didn't. There's always something out there. But from something that didn't. Played around with some non-alcoholic, some maltase negative yeast, and I got those wild idea that maybe we can make like a frozen style with it, where we do some kettle souring and try that, and with the maltase negative, so it does produce a little tiny bit of alcohol, but most of the body and everything. And it's kind of something that's newer out in the market in the non-alcoholic market anyway, which I'm not super excited about. But from this particular beer, the lactic acid component of it, mixed with this lack of fermentation, was an instant dumper. That from the first get-go, we're like, that's really bad. I'll spare you all of the adjectives that we used to describe it, but it was not good at all. One thing that happened to me in a collaboration with St. Arnold, though, on the flip side of that, we did a Goza style beer, so kettle sour, dry hopped, and with our Kellerweiss yeast, so which is a traditional heavy yeast that we've got from a castle in Germany. Well, my experience with that yeast, and then adding in dry hopping and the lactic fermentation part of it, I was pretty convinced that was the worst idea I've ever heard. And it was just going to be this giant fart parade of just horribleness coming out. And it was on point to being one of the worst beers in the cellar of all time, up until we dry hopped it. And we dry hopped it with Amarillo, just like a touch, like nothing. Like when I say dry hop, like I'm talking like just like the faintest hint of dry hops in here, like a 1/16 of a pound. And it changed that beer overnight. Overnight, I put a torpedo on that. Our torpedo processes, so circulating exteriorly from the fermenter with hops. I came in the next day and I almost like fainted. It's like, what just happened? It was magic. Still to this day, one of the best beers I think that I've ever collaborated on anybody with, and I would love to do it again. It was in the beer camp. The second time we put out beer camp, the variety pack in there is our St. Arnold collaboration. So
Sierra Nevada Brewing, Houston, Texas.
Yep.
That's my hometown. I know them.
Great breweries, great beers. Oh man, amazing. But yeah, it was just.
Also, to help you out, most people call a 1/16 of a pound an ounce.
Oh, there you go. Sorry.
So I'm a mead maker. That's most of what I do. I did a little bit of beer home brewing for a while, but I had this idea. I've had a lot of ideas. Most of them don't work out, which is totally fine, but they're usually drinkable. I had this idea that I would try and see what a Belgian wit would look like as a mead, and it was actually not so bad. You know, the orange peel was really nice, up until the moment that I added the coriander, and I crushed it up. And it turns out a very little bit of that goes a very long way. And I ended up drinking about a half gallon of orange pith hand soap. So I pre-gamed with a little bit of vodka and powered it down because you can't let it go to waste. There's sober children all over the world, right? But yeah, no, coriander, very light touch. That's where I learned the lesson. You can always add more later.
Freshly ground coriander too. You got to get fresh stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that was a soapy wine.
Any tasting notes for us on that 2020 Bigfoot?
Oh, yeah. I always talk about balance when I talk about Bigfoot. And we actually have a Bigfoot horizontal virtual tour that we do every Friday. But this is my balance meter. This side's malt. It's like way over here on hops. It's like a huge, just massive whack of American hop note. I always go pine tar, a little bit resinous. It's right there. It's super prevalent. And then you wait a minute, the malt comes in and punches in. I always get a lot of like, toffee, caramel, a little bit of like dark stone fruit, and then just like a very long, lingering, very pleasant bitterness. It just like hangs out.
All right, next question is Alex.
Hey, so going from the question of your mistakes, what advice or what thing would you most tell homebrewers to avoid or not to get caught up in?
I wouldn't. I mean, honestly, I mean, the world's your oyster out there, and it is nowadays. I mean, case in point. I mean, who would have known? I mean, with everything going on out there. Yeah, I mean, hazy IPAs. Yeah, something like that came from a home brewer. I didn't come from a professional brewer's mind. So
yeah.
Absolutely. I wouldn't. No, I'm open to everything.
If it doesn't make you sick, it's a win.
I would make sure your pH is low enough and your alcohol is high enough.
Cool. Thanks.
Rich.
Right on. So, are there any cicerones among you? And what killer beer and food pairings for Sierra Nevada beers do you have that you could throw at us that we could do in our own little spare time?
Yeah, I love food and beer. Max is a pretty big fan of food and beer too. So Max, why don't you go first, man?
Pretty big food and beer pairings here. As far as personal favorites, I don't really know. To be honest, right now, all I can think about is candy and beer. We were thinking about something to do for like a Halloween tasting event or whatever. So we were thinking about pairing some candy and beer. So if I think of something with substantial food, I will let you know. Trevor, I'll let you just take the lead.
Yeah, sure. And again, I'll go all day on this stuff. Bigfoot, we actually make a Bigfoot stew in the pub on site. That's phenomenal. So like a heavy beef stew goes really, really good with this. Every time I try Bigfoot, I think about roasted meats as well. Always in for it. One of those massive turkey drumsticks, like a lot of Maillard crusting all over the outside would be fantastic for it. And again, I did chili with it, which was really cool. I was a big fan of pairing Eau Treves with more Eau Treves. That was pretty awesome. That worked out really well for me. I actually, strangely enough, I find Hazy Little Thing is a really great salad beer for me. It's almost like it plays the exact opposite of what you're trying to do. There's these kits that are sold at the store sometime called like Sunflower Crunch or something like that, and it's a really bright, like lettuce and radicchio and sunflower and lemon poppy dressing, that kind of theory. I'm huge on those. I think that stuff is fantastic. One of my all-time favorites is always going to be IPA and carrot cake. So torpedo and carrot cake, pale ale, just because it's got so much to it, and carrot cake. It's a weird sounding pairing, but it is so good. It is so phenomenal. But the all-time best food and beer pairing I've ever had in my entire life was at the Ginger Man in Austin, Texas. It was a roast beef sandwich with horseradish and a pickle, and I had a giant cup of just really fresh Saison. And it was a good day.
Nice.
What Saison was it?
Triple Carmelie, who unfortunately fell to the dark side, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. I believe InBev purchased them in 2016 or 17. But, yeah, this was like 2010. So.
Yeah, I'd have to say one that resonates with me. I still remember because celebration season is coming up too, and that happens to be probably my all-time favorite beer. Was one day someone in the pub made us a bunch of like sticky buns, like cinnamon rolls, like really gooey, caramely, nice and creamy. We paired it with some celebration, and that was one of just ones, I guess, it resonates because it was so mind-blowing. I personally have never been into food and beer pairing very much, at least in a way that matters. And doing that was a big, nice surprise. I'm like, wow, this is freaking delicious.
Awesome.
Yeah. If you're looking for fun projects to do at home, if you get about 3 bottles of pale ale, you can decant lees out of them, and you can make a pretty solid bread starter out of that.
Nice.
Yeah. I would feed it with a mixture of honey and molasses, but it makes a good starter.
Thank you.
Yeah. Gentlemen, we are running a little bit over, so any other questions you guys want to get in, let's do it now. I can't keep my people for too much longer, although this has been an absolute blast with you all.
We've had a great time. We appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, thank you. We don't have any more hands up at the moment, so I think that that covers all our questions. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, I will
really awesome.
actually, right now, I will drop my email into the chat so that you guys can always reach out to me with anything else you have, and I will try to get you the best answers we can possibly get.
Excellent. Well, on behalf of Ribs, I just want to thank you all for stopping by tonight and answering our questions. We got a lot of good information out of you guys, and hopefully one day, once all this silliness is over with, I guess most likely individually, because we don't have the club funds to organize a big club trip, but we'll make our way out
Fundraising.
Yeah, we'd love to have you guys here. We'd love to host you for a beer. I'll say on a personal note, I know the world's a little bit insane right now. I hope you guys and your families are as safe as you can possibly be. And thank you so much for having us. Answering questions is honestly like our favorite part of any of these kinds of experiences. So getting to do an experience where we just answered questions was a total blast. Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah, and absolutely. Thank you guys. Love talking to fellow homebrewers any chance I get. Most of the time my friends just tell me to shut up. So thanks for holding with me here.
We enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Pleasure meeting you guys. This is actually my first time sitting in front of the camera doing something like this. I'm usually doing it in person. So a bit of a learning curve, but you guys are a blast. And you gave me an excuse to drink some more Bigfoot. So that's pretty awesome.
Excuse anytime.
Yeah. Mr. Mike, do me a favor and send the recording to that email address I dropped in the chat if you don't mind. We always love having this stuff so we can review and look for ways to improve our experiences.
Cool.
Will do.
Appreciate that. All right, gentlemen. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.